again, we want to start with this baker's dozen and add other conditions in a logical, progressive way. Folks, I think it's going to take us, even with this group in year one, 80,000 pounds of medical cannabis to serve the patients. That's going to be a big job for the Department of Ag and others. So, you know, we want to start that way. Now, there are, we have most of the legislature now understanding that we're not adding any new drug to the mix. This is not a new OxyContin coming out of a pharmaceutical company. This is a drug that not only has been around forever, it is our #1 illicit drug. Somewhere between 1 in 8 and 1 in 12 Tennesseans admit using it recreationally now. And if you look at studies of these different patient groups, the percentage there next to the disease is the percentage of patients in that category who already admit to using cannabis in surveys that we've looked at. So if you apply those numbers, you know, HIV/AIDS up to 1/3 are already using it. MS, we're going to be curious, but I'm going to guess in Tennessee 25 to 35% of our MS patients are already using, even though it's illegal. Cancer, again, hepatitis C. Just looking at these 4 conditions, we may have over 25,000 patients already going to the streets trying to find cannabis to relieve their symptoms. And folks, there are 10 other conditions besides these 4. So we're already dealing with large numbers of people whose only access is the streets, basically. And again, that said 9 other conditions. We just added post-traumatic stress disorder. We're one of the first states who will propose to start a program with PTSD being one of the first conditions. Other states have tended to add that later. We think the evidence is pretty clear, so we want to start with that. For a state that's now talking about a tight budget and having to cut our state departments 5%, the Safe Access Program, according to the fiscal review staff here, will be in the black by year 2. They acknowledge that this is an immediate moneymaker. If we are able to keep the price of cannabis in this program to $100 an ounce and distribute it in this fashion, the state is in a position to start with to get 20 cents of every dollar spent on medical cannabis. We think this program, again, will not only be self-funding, but be returning money to the general fund fairly quickly after it's launched. By the way, I'm playing with these numbers. Of course, part of it is because I'm a farmer, but I'd like to propose that 60% go to the producer, because that's where all the work is, or most of the work. We cut the processor and dispensary to around 15% apiece, cut the state's portion to 10%, but allow medical cannabis to be taxed, which is not the case with pharmaceuticals now. So the state still ends up, our government entities will still end up getting around 20% if we do that. When I started this idea, we were telling the nation that Tennessee was going to tax this higher than any other state had proposed. Colorado's already gone past us. Colorado is 25% coming back to the state, plus additional fees and other taxes. Here are the 3 arguments we've gotten in the last week, and these are the arguments you might get as you meet with your legislators. The first argument is that we shouldn't be adding a new drug to the mix. We have such a serious pharmaceutical abuse problem already in the state, we shouldn't be adding cannabis to the mix. To which my answer is, to the legislator who said that, do you get out much? You know, cannabis is here, and it's been here for a long time. Tennessee, by the way, has been ranked in the top 5 states for production of cannabis by the DEA for the last 40 years. Cannabis is not a new drug in our state. The next point there, let me switch you to something. Okay, here's the illicit use that's self-reported in national surveys in Tennessee. About 10% of people admit using cannabis in the last year, and about 6% admit using it in the last month. I think both of those numbers could probably be doubled, given the methodology that was used to collect it. So again, it's a fairly commonly used substance. So far, the federal researchers who collect this data still do not ask patients, or citizens who participate in the survey, are you using it recreationally or medically? I think we need to add that question pretty soon. Okay. When Speaker Harwell said last week two things, both of which are important. The first is that she is convinced there's a medical usage for cannabis. The second thing she said, though, was Tennessee ought to take its time and really learn from the experience of other states as we move forward, so let's take a little more time. And she said Colorado has just launched its program and we'll learn a lot from it. Speaker Harwell confuses in that statement the recent launch of the Colorado recreational cannabis program, which again started in January, with their medical program, which has been underway 16 years. By the year 2000, we already had 8 states in America with legal medical cannabis programs. By the year 2004, we had 12 states with legal medical cannabis programs. Tennessee can learn from 10 to 18 years of experience with those states. We don't need any more years of experience to look at how a medical cannabis program can work and what we want and what we don't want in our program. So I appreciate very much Speaker Harwell saying she's convinced this has some medical benefit, as did Dr. Hensley last week. And I want to deal with his comment just to show you, here are the states and when they approved. So literally we have 18 years worth of experience with California to learn from on this. These are adding so quickly, this slide's probably already out of date. Dr. Hensley's comment, again, is one you may hear. He said also, he's convinced that cannabis has medical benefit for these young children with intractable epilepsy, but his quote went on to say, but there are a host of other conditions that people would seek cannabis for. And then often legislators will throw in something like, you could get it for a headache, or you could get it for this and that. No, you can't get it for a headache. No, you can't get it for anything except these conditions. But thank you, Dr. Hensley, for acknowledging that cannabis has medical benefit. Again, these are major leaders in our legislature who are now making those decisions. We started with a picture of Piper Kuzer with her head bandaged after another night of intractable epileptic seizures. Here's a picture of Piper Kuzer after having been on cannabis oil for 6 weeks. Her seizures have already declined 75%, according to her parents. She has control of her arms for the first time. She is sleeping through the night for the first time in her life. Her moods are better, her appetite is better. In fact, the Kuzers are experiencing what a lot of these families are experiencing, which is not only the dramatic reduction in seizures, but any so-called side effects are all beneficial. Sleeping better, more attention, control of hands, better moods. Those are all side effects of the cannabis therapy, and they're all positive. They're all good things. Okay, I'm going to stop. We've got about 10 more minutes. Before I just open it to questions, raise your hand if you do have an appointment with a legislator today. 1, 2.
No, I don't.
All right, please, when you leave here, go down to Representative Jones' office. If you don't know who your House member and Senate members are, you can put it online and find out. Yes.
I just have one question.
Okay.
We used to have medical marijuana in the state of Tennessee. What happened? Why?
I'm glad you said that. There are two things about how Tennessee has dealt with medical cannabis. In the early 70s, when the federal government released its Controlled Substances Act and put cannabis temporarily in Schedule I, then appointed a panel to rubber stamp that, and when the panel said, this shouldn't be in Schedule I, they ignored the panel's decision. Tennessee legislature, interestingly, classified cannabis in the early 70s as a Schedule VI drug, where it still is, in a category all by itself in Tennessee, and as far away from Schedule I as you can get. So even our legislators 40 years ago questioned that. In the 80s, Tennessee was one of 8 states that got cannabis, medical cannabis, from the University of Mississippi Pot Farm. That's the federal government pot farm. Our State Board of Pharmacy administered that program without incident for a 6-year period along with the other states. The only reason that program closed down, or the main reason it closed down, was that if you'll remember in the late 80s, the AIDS epidemic was really taking off. I was helping direct the state AIDS program at that time, and all 8 of these states were getting inundated with applications from AIDS patients to be able to access cannabis. President Bush I, the first President Bush, suspended any provision of cannabis to the state programs, and so they all stopped by '88. But again, Tennessee has this experience. Our second co-sponsor, Representative Joanne Favors from Chattanooga, is an RN. She'll speak today at the press conference about the fact that she remembers serving patients who were on the Tennessee program in her hospital in the 80s, and how much benefit her patients received. So, other questions? Yes.
Well, people who can't afford the $100 an ounce be able to grow it on?
No, not at this point.
That's like my significant other doesn't make enough money to qualify for affordable health care. So there are going to be a lot of people falling through the cracks on that.
And there are a couple of ways we can address that. One is to do a sliding scale fee service, which makes sense to me. The reason we're not letting patients grow, or caregivers grow, is that we've known for 6 years, talking with the legislature, that's just a no-starter. We can't get them to go there. Where I think we'll go in Tennessee to a personal grow situation is at whatever point we legalize recreational cannabis. Then I think there's no question that a personal grow would make sense. So,
they haven't even extended Medicaid here.
oh, I know, that, believe me. You'll see me quoted in the Scene this week saying...
Seems like the people that need it most can't get it. I mean,
well, you're mentioning one important thing, which is another point to make to the legislators. No state yet has paid for medical cannabis under insurance. So, patients...
That's actually not true. There have been a few Medi-Cal patients in California who have gotten the state
to reimburse.
reimburse.
I'm glad that we have Jacqueline Patterson, who flew all the way from California today to help support the Cruiser 2 bill. So please welcome Jacqueline Patterson. If you're at the Vanderbilt gathering this evening, she'll speak at that gathering, and she'll be here to go around with some of you to your legislators.
The Vanderbilt didn't get rescheduled?
Pardon?
I thought the Vanderbilt thing got rescheduled.
No, it's on at 7 o'clock
Okay,
tonight.
On the normal thing on Facebook, it was saying it was rescheduled.
Well, there was another event that had been scheduled for Surratt, and that event has canceled. Our event is at the Owen School of Management, and it's going on at 7 tonight. Yes, ma'am.
It's my understanding that this bill's still in committee, and there are 2 votes that they're needing, or what's
No.
the status of the bill?
The bill has been assigned to the Health Subcommittee in the House, which is where it belongs. It has had no hearing. It will not get a hearing, even though it's assigned to the House Health Subcommittee, until we get a Senate companion bill. There's no point in debating a bill that exists only in one house and not in both, so it will be given the lowest priority in the Health Subcommittee until we get a Senate sponsor.
Is there any traction in the Senate